Welcome to Season 3 of the School Leadership Show. In this episode, Jen David Lang of The Main Idea and I talk about a set of resources that she has developed to help school leaders through these challenging times. This series of one-pagers titled Leading in Disruptive Times each addresses an important topic in a clear and concise way. The first one we tackle is clarity and communication. Jen has offered to send copies of these one-pagers to folks if you email her at j.david-lang@themainidea.net. Enjoy this conversation with my frequent co-host, Jen David Lang. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the School Leadership Show. I have, as always, Jen David Lang with me. Hi, Jen.
Hi there. Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. Yeah, we dragged you out of bed early for this one. Thanks.
We're all sleeping later as educators than usual, so yeah, a little bit.
That is one nice. So we're recording this on Friday, May 22nd, to put it in context for folks. And it is interesting, as I just kicked my heater on here, let me turn that off, that how things have changed probably since we last talked. So,
Yes.
we're people who listening to this are probably in various stages of dealing with this crisis. And Jen, you have put together some pretty cool resources that we're going to talk about today, and I would imagine make available to people if they would like.
Yes, sure. Definitely. Shoot me an email.
Okay, so tell us what you've been working on here.
So pretty soon after the schools started shutting down, I realized that there were similarities in what school leaders were going through with this crisis as when they lead for change, like when they start a new school initiative, except for, obviously, this is change that none of us have asked for. So I looked at the literature, and whenever you read about leaders leading for change, the C's of change come up, not C's in like the ocean, but the letter C. So the idea is that words that start with C help us as leaders as we manage change. So things like collaboration, communication, culture, commitment, clarity, celebration, all those words that start with C. So I decided to create a series of one-pagers to help school and district leaders as they deal with this change.
As they ride the seas of change. Pretty
Yeah.
nice little nice work there. Nice little literary action going on.
Yes, yeah.
So we were going to talk today about communication, right?
Yes.
I think they're all foundational, but this is the most foundational of the foundational, maybe.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you pulled out of the literature and really from your experience and from working with school leaders around communication that really you have found to be helpful for folks?
Sure. Well, let me just back up. This was the second one. The first one I did was on calm and comfort. How do you establish calm and comfort in your school, especially in the beginning stages of this crisis? So I'm happy to share that one. Maybe we'll talk about that one another time. And then the second one is about communication. And so I thought that if you think about it, most of us got to our positions as school leaders because we're good communicators, right? So I bet, Mike, when you had your first leadership job, right, assistant principal, I bet you thought you were a pretty good communicator, yes?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of my own work.
And I'm sure you are. Yeah, most of us feel like we're good communicators when we're leaders. But the truth of the matter is, first of all, when you're a leader, nobody really tells you when you're not doing a good job communicating. They don't tell you when you're not meeting their needs with your communication style. And the second thing is, I don't know that we all have a full enough understanding, or not understanding, but we don't think about all the facets of communication, right? So most of the time when you think of communication, like what's the first thing that comes to mind, Mike, when somebody mentions communication? Being good at what?
Telling people, delivering information to people.
Absolutely, right? We think about our speech, what we say. So I decided to start this one-pager with a quotation to shake that up, to help leaders think about communication. So I quoted Maya Angelou, who said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So that's a strange quotation to start in talking about communication, right? Because we're thinking, oh, I share information. That's why I communicate. But during this stressful time, what I'm suggesting is that we need to think about the impact of our communication on the people that we lead. So I don't know if that seemed a little strange to start with that quotation or what your reaction was to that.
No, I think that definitely resonates because I have found as I've been communicating with folks that I work with and in the teams in the organization that I'm part of, that really is how it has evolved into the way things start. Really checking in with people and finding out, what needs they have that haven't been met, or how
Mm.
I can help, or how their managers can help them, their supervisors, and then getting into the other stuff. And that was, I'm going to tell you, that was a switch for me.
Mm.
Right? Because I'm, especially when you're busy, there's a tendency to just get right to it. Like, okay, we got things to do. We got to do. Let's go down through the list, and really, taking a beat and stepping back and saying, well, in order to get our best work done, we need to meet some of these basic needs first. So I completely get that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you slowed down and you knew the what. You knew what you wanted to say, but you took some time, like you said, to check in. And so I encourage school leaders to take a moment and think, okay, I know what I want to say. I'm good at saying it, but what do I want the people around me to feel after communicating it? Do I want them to feel reassured? Do I want them to feel hopeful, cared for, calm? So, really sort of turning the mirror around and looking at the other people and thinking about the impact of your communication. And that's why I didn't just start with, here are a bunch of strategies to communicate well, but on the left side of my page, I started with, why do we communicate? What are the purposes of communicating, particularly during a crisis? So, the first one is simply to provide clarity. Families, students, staff, they're getting information from all over the place. The government, the newspaper, fake websites online. So the school is actually the place that people are in a community are used to turning for information. So you as a leader can really provide clarity with all of this noise, what's important to listen to. And then guidance, right? Some people are saying, keep your kids at home, send your kids to play dates. There's all this competing information. So people are looking to you for guidance in areas that you might never have been expected to give guidance on. And then certainly for comfort, right? This idea that by the leader speaking, you can actually provide someone with comfort. You are the calm in the boat. Have you heard that being calm, a leader's emotions are very contagious, right? So if you're frantic, they're going to feel frantic. So if you convey your information in a calm and measured way, that's contagious. People will feel that. So yes, why do we communicate? To be clear, for guidance, for comfort, to provide an ear. Sometimes people just need to tell you about the stresses they're going through in this distance learning situation. They don't need you to do anything. They just need you to listen. And then certainly to provide hope. I have a quote here from Napoleon that the leader's role is to define reality and then give hope. So I don't know if you have any examples of these 5 areas, Mike, where you feel like, yes, that's why I was communicating.
Oh, definitely, particularly around the clarity and the comfort. I think it is confusing. People, this is uncharted territory for lots of folks. And a lot of the people I work with now are in technology. And some of them have come up through the ranks in education, and some have come from industry where they did work at home a little bit. So it's fascinating to really try to get people to talk about their experiences and share what's working and what's not. And really, and I think you'll get into this next a little bit, but really just conveying that I don't have all the answers, and I'm willing to help ask the questions and work through things, but I don't think anybody has all the answers right now, which, and we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, I think as leaders, we didn't have all the answers before, but I think there was more hesitation to be vulnerable and admit that, whereas now it's a little more accepted. It's a little more acceptable to say, I don't have all the answers, um, but you can share what you do know. And I think in thinking about how do we most effectively communicate, what do families most need? What do our teachers, our staff, our kids, what do they most need? First of all, they need us to be regular. So whatever you decide to do, whether it's sending home an email every Friday or if it's a check-in every morning with your staff, if you can try to be regular, there's so much of a lack of predictability right now. People really appreciate that, knowing that Mike's email to the team is going to come on Wednesday afternoons. Second thing is to be honest, just like you were saying, we can only share what we know. Families are clamoring what's happening with reopening school. You can say, this is what I know and this is what I don't know. That will also build trust. The more honest you are, the more people will trust you in your further communications. Be brief, right? I just created a one pager. People are tired. There's information overload. As leaders, we do tend to talk too much. So can you be brief? Write out a first draft of whatever you're going to email or send out and then cut it. Cut it if you can. So be regular, be honest, be brief. And then a great tactic is to use stories. So Mike and I are both in New York State, where perhaps you've heard of our governor, Andrew Cuomo, and one of the reasons why he has been doing such a good job and stands out is he really tells stories. So I don't know, Mike, if you've heard him, he tells stories about his brother, Chris Cuomo, who's a CNN anchor, and their sort of friendly rivalries growing up. He tells stories about his mother in her 80s, Matilda, and that really helps to bring things to life for people, that he's not just some kind of, lack of caring leader, but he really has stories to illustrate what he's talking about. It's not statistics and numbers, but real people.
Well, and it humanizes him too in a way that I think helps him connect with people on a different level. And I think that's what good leaders do. I mean, the folks that you're working with and supporting need to know that you're going through the same things they are.
Yeah. I think it humanizes the leader and it humanizes the issue. So COVID-19, maybe you don't know anyone who's been sick or physically affected by this disease, and yet if we tell stories, then it becomes more real and maybe people are more likely to social distance, right? So use stories, tell stories about your teachers, tell stories about family members, also for hope, right? Tell stories of resilience when your school community is getting down, and they don't have to just be resilience within your community. You might read about something that's happening in Indiana, about how kids got together and sewed masks. So stories are also a great way to build hope. And a fifth way, so when you're communicating, think about being regular, being honest, being brief, using stories, and then think about connecting, right? Use new tools, send a Loom video of yourself so people can see your face, set up your staff on Slack. You really want to think about communicating in a way that is connecting, not just sending out the regular, email newsletter, but are there new ways that you can connect?
And I think part of that connection too is, and I don't know where it fits exactly, I think the stories and the honesty, but really letting people know how much you appreciate what they're doing. Because I think I've noticed that, because as, when you're physically together, it's easy to kind of, you wander by, oh yeah, hey, thanks for doing that. It's good to see you. Yep. But I think it requires a little bit more purpose and being deliberate to let people know that you appreciate the work that they're doing. Because we talked about this before we started recording, but I haven't worked this hard in terms of just being scheduled and, going from one thing to the next since I student taught kindergarten in the 90s. That was the last time I felt this tired at the end of a workday. And it's just so, I don't know. And I think part of that connection with people is, and I've had these conversations with lots of folks to just say, are you taking care of yourself? How are you taking care of yourself?
Mm.
And telling people to stop working.
Mm.
When you get to, have a break, get to the end of the day and
Yes.
stop.
Yeah.
We use WebEx Teams as
Mm.
an instant messaging app, I guess, in our organization. And I got pinged a couple times last night from people who were answering questions that I had asked earlier in the day. And I said, stop, turn this off. This is not an emergency right now. And
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to see how this whole thing has affected people and the way that they work, because I think that's
Yeah.
very different.
I think it connects to two things. First, what you're talking about, like keeping the work, not overwhelming yourself, that is very connected to providing guidance, right? So if you're emailing people at 10 p.m. at night and expecting them to respond, then you're sending the message, don't take a break, right?
Exactly.
So, they need guidance from you. So show a video of you sitting in your yard or your front steps, taking a moment, right? You got to model. By modeling that balance, that's providing guidance for people. You're communicating it's okay to take a break. It's okay to have an ice cream cone with your kids and not be on your email at 10 p.m. at night. Um, and then the second thing that you're talking about, appreciating people, that connects back to the Maya Angelou quote, how you're making people feel. If you can make your teachers and your families, everyone feel appreciated, they will weather this storm so much better. They will be more likely to stay engaged, continue to work hard. So appreciation is a huge part of how you make people feel. Are people walking away from Zoom calls with you, texts, phone calls, however you're reaching out, feeling appreciated? So that's a great way to think about it. And the other thing is, this seems like a lot that we're asking of leaders. Can you do all of these things? Can you provide comfort and guidance and be honest and be brief and use stories and connect? So, one principal, she made a great point, which was that her superintendent is fantastic at providing comfort and telling stories and being that kind of using that kind of connecting communication. But she herself was much better at being regular, being brief, getting the facts out. And that's a perfect balance. Each leader doesn't have to have all of the skills, but together as a leadership team, do you have some people who could really tell stories and connect, and other people who are just really good at, the Tuesday memo, the sheet of facts, the clarity? So I don't know if you're finding that, Mike, that you're seeing different leaders have strengths in different areas, but it comes together and they balance each other.
100%. And it's interesting. I always say that, I don't remember where I heard it, but I heard one time somebody say, "What's in you comes out when you are squeezed."
Mm.
So really, any kind of crisis just sort of amplifies who you are. And I
Mm-hmm.
think to have an awareness of that if, that principle, good for her to have the awareness that, she's better at certain parts of this, and then either to tap into other folks who complement her strengths, or to, have the self-awareness to work on whatever it is that, needs to be different. So yeah, it's been
What if
interesting.
I put you on the spot and ask you, where would you put yourself on the continuum from, being super clear and brief with your communications and very regular versus you really provide the comfort and guidance people need? Or are you just great at it all?
I'm just great at all of it, Jen. I appreciate you recognizing that. No, I think it's interesting, because I think I have traditionally been good at the brief, the regular, um, you know, certainly, and using stories to some extent. But I feel like I've shifted more toward the stories and the connection and stuff like that. And I think mostly because the kind of work that needs to get done now just requires so many more people and different moving parts to the point where I really have internalized how I can't do this
Mm.
work by myself. This isn't the kind of thing I can shut my door and just do. This
Hmm.
is this is this this work that we're doing requires just so many people working together, and it really reinforced for me that as a leader I get things done through other people.
Mm.
And I think that's been a really humbling part of this for me as a leader, to realize how just how important everybody in the system is to getting the work done. And I think I sort of do that before, but this kind of brings it into stark relief that there is no uh, there's just no way that all of this could get done unless everybody was rowing in the same direction.
Which is kind of ironic, right? This realization of this extreme collaboration in a time where we're all social distance, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the irony is not lost on me. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And that sort of brings me to the last area, which is a lot of us, when we think about communication, we don't think about listening, right? It's what you started off saying. We think about speaking and what we're going to say. What do we need to convey? Everybody needs to know this. Everyone needs to hear this. But really a huge part, in fact, I would say the more important part of communication is listening. And in working collaboratively, you cannot work collaboratively without listening. So the good news is that communication from the school leader used to be a lot more one-sided, right? Do you remember those? You'd come into school. I remember as a teacher in my mailbox, and there'd be a piece of paper from the principal, right? The Monday morning memo,
Hey,
or
I used to do that when
exactly.
I was the principal.
Exactly. And that's one-sided, right? You get that from the principal and there's no communication there. There's no two-way communication there. It's one-way communication. Or we put pieces of paper in kids' backpacks to bring home as newsletters. That's all one-way communication. So as much as you're frustrated by technology right now, one of the beautiful things is there's so many forms of technology that allow communication to be two-way so that we can listen to what people have to say. So I'm wondering what kind of ways you've seen that school and district leaders have created opportunities for listening, for hearing, for getting feedback from teachers, leaders, students, families. Are you seeing any concrete examples of creating opportunities for listening?
Yeah, we've had a couple of districts use a platform called Thought Exchange,
Mm,
where it's like a survey but not. It's where you kind of pose a question out there to people, and then they're able to respond to it, and then rate. It's all anonymous. Other
mm,
people's responses, so
mm,
it pushes the consensus to the top in a
mm,
real sort of organic and democratic way. And people have gotten a lot of good information from platforms like that. I think that's one sort of end of it with the kind of anonymous technology piece, and then
mm,
I think the other piece is just those opportunities to check in with people and
mm,
ask open-ended questions, and then stop talking. And then
mm,
and I joke with I was meeting with a couple of teams yesterday. I've been trying to meet with all the teams in our division over the last couple of weeks, and just a half hour. And these are groups of anywhere from 5 people to 10 people. It's about the size. And I usually start off by just kind of saying, this I'm here to listen. I want to find out what's going on. I want to find out what's working. What are the obstacles? How can, basically the message is, how can the leaders make it easier for you to do your jobs and
mm,
get the obstacles out of the way?
mm.
And it's funny because I'll tell whoever the leader of the group is, I'll just say, if I keep talking too much, just mute me, which which is not something you're able to do in an in-person meeting. So it's kind of nice on WebEx. Just you're the host, mute me, and then let other people talk. But I think those ask in getting away from the how's everything going, or
Yeah.
how are you holding up? Okay, meaningless questions right now. It's more about what's working, what do you need, And I try to have people, encourage people to tell stories, because a lot of the folks I work with are technical folks who have, skill sets in areas that may or may not, lend themselves to being super open with stories and things like that. So, really, what's the funniest thing that happened on a WebEx meeting to you this week, or something that you saw? And it's there's some funny things going on out there that, people are just rolling with. And I think trying to encourage people to tell stories too. I think it's not just about the leader telling stories, because then it's just about the leader. I think it's about, like you said, listening to what other people are experiencing and being able to resonate with that in a way that people know that the leader is experiencing the same things.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you bring up so much here from, yes, we do need to ask how are you doing, but beyond that, trying to think of some more robust questions that get at what's really going on, right? When you say, what can I help you with? You're assuming everyone needs help, right?
Yep.
And then they're more comfortable sharing. I think the idea of muting is not a small thing, but I've been on meetings with people and I specifically mute myself so that I can listen, right? And even if I start to interrupt, no one can hear it because I'm on mute.
Right, exactly.
So there's a skill there. I think that we have to remember our listening skills, even though you're on, WebEx meeting or a Zoom meeting. So what are our listening skills that we tend to forget as leaders? Absolutely, pause, put your cell phones on vibrate, put things away, and use attending behaviors. Validate what people are saying. It doesn't mean you agree with it, right? I hear your concern about the buses, blah, blah, blah. I hear your concern about distance learning. By validating people, they're more likely to go on and continue to talk.
Absolutely. And that pause that's huge. And I joke, particularly when I'm on calls with folks who either are teachers or have been teachers, about wait time, because with the way the technology works, you really do have to wait in order, because if you ask a question, you have to wait a substantial amount of time, because people have to get their mouse, find the unmute button, unmute themselves, wait a second, and then talk. So it's amazing how that has, I feel like it has just changed the flow of conversations in not necessarily a bad way. I think it has forced people to slow down a little bit, be a little more thoughtful, and there are good things coming out of this that I think we're going to look back and say, wow, there's some positive changes that came about as a result of these circumstances.
Yeah. Did you know Americans are uniquely uncomfortable with silence?
Yep.
So what I'll say on a Zoom meeting is I'll say, I'm going to give extra wait time because of what's going on or the technology, or I say to people, I'm really comfortable with wait time after I ask a question, and then I just mute myself. And so they know, oh, Jen is super comfortable waiting, so I can take my time to think. I'm
going to have to say something because she's not going to jump back in.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm not going to be rescued by Jen. She just shut herself up. So, yeah. So I think, yes, just to continue with listening, because I think it's so important. I also like the idea of sending out some kind of surveys, like you're mentioning, like Thought Exchange, but it could be anything, a Google form. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we're listening to not just the most vocal teachers and parents. We need to listen to everyone. In the same way as a good teacher in a classroom, we no longer think it's okay just to have two hands raised and move on. So what are we doing to hear from everyone in the community, all of the staff members, particularly those, because I'm sure at this point we've all, quote unquote, lost teachers or staff members where they're not really engaging. So how do we listen to those who we've lost contact with, or as much as we would like? We need to think of ways to send surveys to everyone, Or one idea I have is setting up 2-minute power one-on-one meetings. So that means you're going to hit every single staff member for just a couple of minutes to make sure that you hear from everyone. It's a longer story about how to set that up to work well, but think about how are you listening and hearing from those who don't speak up as much. There's this great story that I heard in the news about a community where, to help elderly people, the elderly homebound had 3 pieces of paper, green, yellow, and red, that they would put in the window. And green meant, I'm doing okay. Yellow is like, I just need a small errand. And red is like, help, I need help. And the idea is that you could very easily hear from all of the elderly homebound every day by just looking at these papers. So how can you hear from everyone every day? Very quick, in a Zoom meeting, you do the polls that Zoom has, I'm doing, 1, 2, or 3. 1, terrible emergency. 2, I'm okay. 3, I'm really doing well, and then see who are the ones. I need to communicate with my ones.
Absolutely. I love that idea.
And so, yeah, I think we should just end there, and remember that sometimes listening is not about getting information. Sometimes it's just used to help and comfort someone.
Well, Jen David Lang, as always, a spectacular conversation. We're talking about one of your one-pagers about leading in disruptive times that I'll put in the show notes that people can email you. And I think in full disclosure, Jen and I talked about how we wanted to make sure that, this was really concise and short, because people, have a lot going on, and we still made it a half hour. So,
whoops, sorry.
That's okay. But it was good, great conversation, and we'll tackle your other couple of one-pagers soon. And I don't know, any parting shots?
No, just, thank you to everybody for all the work that you're doing. We know how much educators are really on the front lines. So thank you, much appreciation, and reach out if you need anything.
All right. Till the next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.